On today's episode of Locked On Wild, I've come up with a foolproof formula to do midseason report cards.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we embark on our mid-season report cards. We'll start with Marcus Johansson, Jakub Lauko, and Yakov Trenin. So should be fun here today. I'll explain the madness as well. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, and folks, I've done it. Mad scientist in full effect here in my apartment. I found the formula that is going to allow for a very easily repeatable midseason report card grading system. So let's talk about what I've got. So we are doing a grading scale of 40 points for each player. A quarter of that is going to be games played, similar to what you would do for a standard report card. Attendance. So that is a quarter of the grading. 2 pieces of the grading, roughly one half, is going to be points and production. But we want that to weigh a little heavier than games played. In Kirill Kaprizov's case, for example. But we don't want that to be like the biggest part. It's similar to a midterm. Like, it's a big part of your grade, but it's not going to be the only thing, which is why the final quarter of each player's grade is going to be what I call impact games. And this is where the grading system will help with defensemen, because defensemen aren't big points producers. So why would we have only points factor into their grading system as well? Impact games. And this is going to help the players lower in the lineup who do different things than score the goals. So I think it's foolproof. I think it's perfect. And I look forward to getting things started with a player that I think a lot of you are very interested to see the grade. So, of course, with all of these, and we're going to try to get through every player who's played a major role. You know, we'll probably stay away from the players that have only played a handful of games. We're talking the key contributors for this, and still working on the formula for goalies. So that'll probably be next week. But we'll get through the forwards and the defensemen here between now and the 22nd when play resumes. We are working on a crossover with Locked On Red Wings as well to preview the home and home to resume the season starting on the 22nd. So we have a lot of work to do, or I should say I do. So there's going to be no shortage of content coming up here over the next couple of weeks. So let's start with Marcus Johansson. What more is there to say about what Marcus Johansson brings to the table? He is, as of right now, sitting on 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 total points in 47 games played. He is on pace for 23 points, 7 goals, and 16 assists in 69 games. Those are defenseman numbers for a second-line forward. Yikes. So here's what I had. So for games played, Johansson has played 47 out of 56 games, which is 84%. So for the games played portion of this, Johansson is getting 8 out of 10 points. As far as production goes, Johansson is on pace over the course of an 82-game season. I'm weighting everybody on a full 82 compared to their career averages, because I want to fully factor in for players that are having career seasons so that they get the appropriate additional points that they should. So Johansson, 27 points right now. He's on a 27-point pace for a full 82-game season, which is it's not great. His career average for a full 82-game season is 43 points. So Johansson is on pace to hit about 60% of that, which is a D. So he's getting 12 out of 20 for that portion of the grading. And impact games. Now, for Marcus Johansson, I've chosen to lump together games with multiple shots, with 3 shots or more, and games with goals or points. Because you score a goal, you assist on a goal, that's an impact. That is an impact that has been made. I'm also going to throw him the, and maybe this is me just being sympathetic because of how critical I've been all season and last year too. Games with 3 or more shots on goal is what I'm going to consider an impact for Marcus Johansson. He hit 20 impact games. 20 impact games out of 47 total games. That is 43%. 4 out of 10 for that portion of the grading system. So all told, Marcus Johansson finishes with 24 out of 40. That's a D, ladies and gentlemen. That is a D. And the only reason that it was a D is because Johansson played in 80% of the games so far this season. But the impact is very low. 43% of Johansson's games are what you would consider impact. And honestly, if you even cut it a little further to games where there are points being scored or games where you've got, multiple shots on goal, it's probably less than that, which is a problem because up until recently, Johansson has been filling a prominent second line role for this team. And if you're giving D production for a spot that needs really B at minimum, that's a problem. And that is a problem that has been a problem for a long time. But it is one that I don't think is going to be resolved until the offseason. But you even look in the month of February. Johansson's played 3 total games working his way back from concussion, and he has 3 shots on goal. So a very low bar, but still a pretty difficult one to try to climb over. As Johansson missed, basically the entire half of the month of January after the Edmonton game, 2 points and 6 shots on goal in 7 games in the month of January. And that was followed up by a 5-point month of December. It's just not enough. The production is not enough for what you need for that spot. And so save being in the lineup, and maybe that shouldn't even necessarily factor in as much as it does. But even still, attendance is attendance. And the fact that he's been in the lineup and of the 47 games that he's played, he has only provided impact in half, not even half. That's not great. And I am, for one, ready for the opportunity to move on from that spot and get somebody else in there that can do anything to provide a little bit better impact in, again, as key of a spot as you have in your entire lineup is second line wing. And you're getting somebody that's just existing. That's not great. Not great at all. So it's a D for Marcus Johansson for what we have seen so far this season. And I know there are going to be a lot of comments saying it's got to be an F. I don't disagree, but we're doing this the same way for every player. So we can try to get some sort of a grading system. And honestly, I'm going to probably use this system to grade players after the season is done as well. Just wanted something that is easily repeatable and doesn't lead to me getting frustrated halfway through as to how come the formula is not working. So it's a D for Johansson. And honestly, that math tracks. So when we come back, we will talk about what we've seen from newcomer Jakub Lauko, who I think we would all agree has done some good things for this team, but obviously he's going to get dinged for the games. So we'll talk about Jakub Lauko's mid-season report card as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. For instance, when I was on the job hunt over the summer, spent a lot of time on Indeed, and it was so great to see some of those key posts for the positions that I was looking for show up right at the top of the screen. And best of all, Indeed does a great job of highlighting the specific skill set that particular positions are looking for. So you have somebody like me who is a multimedia journalist and is looking for something in that area. They did a great job of putting those skill sets out there to match me up with jobs. And lo and behold, found one. And now things are rolling along just great. So definitely give Indeed a look if you are somebody who is looking for a job or you are an employer who is looking to fill a position. Plus, now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We will keep you up to date as to when the next live show with Denny is. We're hoping to get one in here this week. But if not, we will definitely be back to normal on Sunday. Bummed that I missed out on all of the Denny birthday festivities on Saturday. But, that's just the way it goes at this point in the season. And we'll do another one of those in the spring to get everybody together again. Looked like it was a great time. So glad everybody had fun and glad that the Minnesota Wild beats the New York Islanders as well. All right, let's move on to another midseason report card. We're going to go with Jakub Lauko, one of the new additions for the Minnesota Wild in the offseason. And for Lauko, it's been a bit of a rough go for him from a games perspective. Lauko has thus far played 33 of 56 games. And so if we use that same grading scale, we're giving Lauko 5 out of 10 as he's played 59% of games. Now, as far as a points pace goes, Lauko's got 2 goals, 3 assists, so 5 total points in the 33 games. Now, we weight that out over a full 82-game season, and Lauko right now is on pace for 8 points in 50 games. So we weighted that with kind of where his career average is at, and his career average over the course of an 82-game season, he's at about 16 points for a full 82-game season. So Lauko gets half of that, 10 out of 20. impact games for Lauko. And for players like fourth line guys, third line guys, defensemen, obviously the impact score is going to be a little different than it will be for your like key impact scorers who you expect to be at, points or several shots per game. For Lauko, went with multiples from any of the counting stats, whether it be hits, whether it be blocks, shots on goal, things like that. If you can get a game with multiples of those, I would consider that for a fourth line player. I would consider that being making an impact. So Lauko had 21 impact games out of 33 played. That's 64%. That's not too bad. And I feel like had he played more games so far this season, that the impact score would have been higher. But as of right now, it's 6 out of 10. So all told, Lauko is 21 out of 40 in terms of his score, which is it's an F, which is unfortunate. But look, we know from what we've seen from Lauko, I think it's safe to say had he played more games so far this season, like if he even had gotten into the 40s in terms of games, that would have bumped up his game score. That would have also bumped up his points score, and it probably would have upped his impact games score as well. But we used that adage when we talked about Lauko's latest injury, is that you can't really help the team out in the tub. And look, he brings a nice vibe to the locker room, and it certainly seems like he's fit in well with this mix. He just has dealt with several injuries that have just hampered his ability to make an impact. In the games that he's played, he's been a good fourth line guy for this Minnesota Wild team. He certainly makes a little bit of an impact on the penalty kill as well. So he's a player that I'd like to see more of, and more of an opportunity in the second half to help this team out. We just haven't seen a ton of it so far here in his first season in Minnesota. He's a hit machine when healthy. He's somebody that can certainly throw the hits with the best of them. I mean, his age 23 season with the Boston Bruins, he had 176 hits in 60 games. So you're talking about roughly 3 hits per game for a fourth line guy. That's not bad. That's a nice impact. He reminds me a little bit of Brandon Duhaime. Duhaime obviously was just he hardly missed games. Like just a freakish ability to stay healthy. Lauko just doesn't have that at this point. Now, maybe he'll grow into that a little bit, but right now it's tough to make an impact when you're not out there on the ice. So it's an F right now for Lauko, but again, his is mostly attendance based. So we'll see what the second half of the season has in store. We're going to get to the big free agent signee for the Minnesota Wild in the offseason, Yakov Trenin. Folks, you're going to be interested to see what he got for a score based off of these metrics. And we'll have a little talk about like what do we expect from a guy like Yakov Trenin. That's on the way as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. For those that are not in the state of Minnesota, obviously you have plenty of options for when and where and how And my favorite part about FanDuel is that you can pop the app open while a game is going on, and you have no shortage of different bets to choose from, whether it be, especially in football, second half over is a big one. Will a particular team cover in the second half? Those are huge, especially in the NBA or NFL, and FanDuel can make those happen pretty easily. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We're rolling with report cards here through the rest of the week. A nice break from games, from injury news, from all the other jazz. A nice little change of pace, more of a structured format here over the rest of this week. And then we'll kind of ramp things up as we move into next week as well, ahead of the return to the second half on the 22nd. But let's talk about the big free agent signing for the Minnesota Wild this offseason. That being, of course, Yakov Trenin. And Trenin was a bottom six player. He's a hit machine. He's a player that's, is expected to bring in some toughness, some physicality, and a little help on the penalty kill as well. So let's look at Trenin's score from what he has done so far this season. So from the game's perspective, Trenin has played in 50 out of 56. Now, it's interesting because he has missed a couple of games due to injury, but he's also had a couple of games in which he has been scratched. So there have been a few different instances that Trenin has been battling with here over the course of the season. But all told, 50 out of 56 games isn't bad. It's 89% on the scale, so he gets 8 out of 10 for the games portion. Trenin is on pace right now for 9 goals, 9 assists. 18 total points. His career average for an 82-game season is 22. So he's close in that regard. He's at 82% of his career pace, which gives him 16 out of 20 there. Now, as far as impact games go, and for Trenin, we did the same thing. Multiples of the counting stats, whether it be blocks, hits, goals, assists. Those are the main ones that we're looking at with Trenin. And he ended up with 42 impact games out of 50. So he has been able to give you, multiple hits, multiple blocks, 84% of the time that he's been out there. So that's an 8 out of 10. He finishes with a 32 out of 40 on this grading scale. I think the biggest thing that leads to a little bit of a negative impression with Trenin is the money and the total contract. It's a bit rich. It's a bit much for my tastes, but he's got 149 hits in 50 games, which is a lot. That's roughly 3 per game. He has, he's got 6 goals in 50 games. I think the other thing, too, was it got off to such a slow start. He got off to such a slow start from a production standpoint this season. He went, I think, basically the first 2 full months of the season with 1 assist. He's not going to be a big points guy really at all. But I think the fact that it just took those first 2 months to really get anything going, like in the goals department, I think that led to a little bit of a negative reaction as well. All told, I think considering what he is, I think Trenin has been fine. It's just when you elevate a player like this into different roles that they're maybe not accustomed for, then that's when things start to look bad. He's a fourth line guy at this point, maybe a third liner, but more like a fourth line guy. And I still will hold firm to the fact that I think Trenin was brought in as a little bit of Marcus Foligno insurance. And Marcus Foligno has played pretty much every game this season. So the need for Marcus Foligno insurance has been pretty low. So you could have used this roster spot to bring somebody in who could score or could play a second line role and, give you a component to that line that you were sorely missing. But I understand the logic behind it because Foligno played, I think, 56 games last year. So I understand the logic of it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but here we are. And Trenin, I think for what he is, I think he has done just fine. It's you just got to be careful to not expect players to do particular things because they did them with one team. He's a third or a fourth line guy. The offense is very fleeting and few and far in between. He's a guy that can get you maybe double digits in goals, 20 points for the season. That's not a lot. That's fourth line production. And he's on track for slightly less than those numbers. But, if he heats up a little bit in the points department, he'll be right on track for what he typically does. The key things for him are, is he providing good defense? Is he throwing his body weight around? And he has done those things so far this season. I mean, his single game high for hits was against the Ottawa Senators with 10. He's had a couple of games with 6 as well this season. So he certainly is not afraid to throw his body weight around, which is something this Minnesota Wild team needed. But those that maybe say, well, that money would have been much better served spent on a little offense as opposed to another Marcus Foligno. Yeah, I would tend to agree. But just based on this rating system, a B for Trenin so far, considering what he is. I think the Wild have gotten a large amount of that so far this season. Just a little bit of a, you hear the word used in government a lot, a redundancy. Just a little bit of a redundancy for this Minnesota Wild team. So, you take that $3.5, $4 million, and you spend that on a wing, and maybe this season looks a little better than it does right now, which is not to say that the season doesn't look good right now anyway. But a little more offense to this mix would maybe have them a little higher up in the standings. But overall, a B for Trenin, an F for Lauko. Again, more attendance-based than anything else. And a D for Marcus Johansson. Do you agree with the rating system? Let us know in the comments if you agree, if you have other grades that you would hand to these 3 players. I think the most common one is going to be an F for Marcus Johansson and probably something above an F for Jakub Lauko. But again, we're using the same grading scale for everybody to try to determine kind of where they're at with their season so far. So we'll hold everybody to the same standard. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, we will roll through these all week. So make sure to tune in every single day so you don't miss out on any midseason report cards here for the Minnesota Wild. I'm also working on the winning formula for the Minnesota Wild. We're going to take all of the various statistical measures that track performance, and we're going to try to determine which best define Minnesota Wild wins this season. So be on the lookout for that as well. Like I said, we get some work to do. So we're going to do that, and we're going to keep it rolling here at Locked On Wild. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything else that we have to keep you covered with here at Locked On Wild. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.